ready to
Fire away. Yeah.
Hey, welcome everybody. It's my great pleasure to welcome back Cam Fryer, one of the co-founders of Royal City Brewing. We're back in the brew house. Unfortunately, the ambient noise in the beer hall was just a little too much. So we're going to do the show from back here. I encourage all of you to come out. The space is fantastic. Cam, welcome back to the show.
Oh, thanks, Bill. Good to be back. Yeah, definitely. Back here in the bowels of the brewery. Good spot as ever for a couple of beers.
Well, we've got the logo right there.
Yeah, the shiny new decal, still shiny.
So, how do you feel?
You know what? It's pretty good. It's a bit of a relief to get the place functioning again and back as a brewery again. You know, we were able to keep producing during our renovation period just by sheer force of will, really. I think than anything else. The guys really did a heck of a job back here, kind of evenings and weekends, working around plumbers and electricians and drywallers and floor painters and this, that, and everything. And it's kind of really relieving, I think, just to be able to look at the place and recognize it as a brewery again, not a construction site or a construction project anyway. Yeah.
So your footprint is much larger now.
Yeah, we grew about 3 times. We had just under 3,000 square feet beforehand, and we have just over 8,000 now. So not quite tripling, but pretty close.
Yep.
The old unit we took over was just over 5,000 square feet, and so it's provided us quite a bit more room to spread out. So we kind of split the unit up the middle. We're in the back half right now in the production side. And then the whole front of house is our kind of our tap room event space now.
Yep. So you have what used to be, there still is the bottle shop.
Yep.
And then on the left side, where I'm looking, but the right side when you came in, that was where you used to have station.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And now you have space for 150 people over here, plus a patio that was
70. Yeah.
about 70 people.
Yep. Yeah, so we've been able to incorporate the patio into the beer hall space. So a couple of garage doors that roll up now. Yeah. So we just walk right out on the patio in the nice weather, or when the nice weather, those doors will be open. Nice breeze coming through. It'll be hopefully pretty nice spot in the summer. Yeah.
What are we starting with today?
Today I've got us the last keg of our community brew is on right now, so we've got one of those. So the community brew is it's one of my favorite beers that we make. Not because I think it's the best beer we make by any means, but I think it's one of the most interesting. It has one of the best stories, which is kind of why I like it. So we started this brew as I want to say about 7 or 8 years ago now. We started. We've been making it a really long time. And when we first started out, it was a pale ale. The kind of brewed Cali's, just kind of like pale ale base. And every year we sell hop plants to the front of house, like little sprouts to the front of house here, to raise money for an autism service that some friends of the brewery relied on quite heavily for their own kids, both of whom are autistic. So we have a really good relationship with this group. We know them, I've known them for a very long time. So we raise money for them with the hops every year. We charge $10 for a hop plant, and then the whole $10 goes to them. And then the kind of follow on from that was basically we said, well, we've got all these people in Guelph and around that have these hops that we are growing in the backyards now. What do we do with them all? So we decided, well, why don't we just we'll publicize the date that we're going to brew this beer every year. It's usually the first week of September, second week of September, very close week of September. So when we brew it. We'll just put a call and everyone harvest your hops on this date, and we'll throw them in the kettle the next day. And whatever we get, Every year it's different. We have no idea what's coming in the door, what isn't. But whatever we get, we use in a wet hop beer. So this is a wet hop pale ale. It's still a pale ale. However, about 2 or 3 years ago, Matt, the head brewer here now, decided quite correctly that it would be better as a saison. So now it's a Belgian pale ale rather than an American one. His thinking, and I think you again quite right, that style of kind of take what you get, make beer out of it really suits itself to saison. Are the best applied to a saison kind of idea. And so that's what we have here today. This is the 2022 iteration of our community brew. We actually got a lot of hops for it in this year, but every year it's a little bit different. We have no idea what the varietals are that are in it or how much of what. It's just whatever we get goes in the tank. That spends there's about a 2-hour boil on this one, I think, just a little bit longer just to try and incorporate all of the hops that we get. So we've got just an astoundingly large amount of biomass that comes in. And everything goes into the kettle for about 15 to 20 minutes. And we have a big, like a 20-liter T-ball, essentially, that we just cram full of hops, dunk in the kettle for 20 minutes, pull it out, put new ones in, dunk it in again, and away we go. That way we can be certain that we're going to use everything that we have that's been dropped off. Anyone who drops beer off gets a couple of coupons. They can come down and pick up a couple of cans when the beer's ready. Anyway.
Cheers.
Yeah, so this one is, I'll say it's a little clear, but not gonna have that strong kind of phenol from the yeast there, but you get a little kind of herbaceousness out of the hops in this one from this year's iteration. Again, we have no idea what they are. It's just whatever we take, whatever we get, we take. Yeah.
Definitely get the saison.
Yeah. For sure. I think it works really well with it. I think the style lends itself really well to the idea. Good. Yeah.
So soft opening before the 4th.
Yeah.
And a hard opening on the 4th of November.
That was right. Yeah, we had a couple of I think I want to say the 27th of October was the first soft opening. I was kind of brought some friends and family through and just tested out the dishes in the kitchen and tested out the service model that we had. I think we're going to go away from that model right now.
Yeah.
Kind of had like this kind of mix between like a full service kind of standard restaurant service model and then like a beer hall model where it's just a window where you walk up and order. I think ultimately it was a little confusing as to where you're supposed to go when. But so I think we're going to go to a full service kind of idea again, just for people kind of expecting to come in and are seated somewhere, just going up and ordering their own. But yeah, we kind of shook those ideas out during the month of November, and from there. Yeah.
So what's happening next?
Next for the brewery is basically trying to get through December. One of the biggest headaches we're kind of production-wise we're facing right now is usually this time of year we've been brewing pretty consistently and constantly since the summer.
Yeah.
The autumn is typically a really busy season for us. November we usually get a little bit of a lag, and then it's just insane in December. But we're usually sitting on a fair bit of inventory that we've been accumulating steadily since about August just to get that push through December. We didn't get to do that this year just because of the end of construction. Our brewing schedule is still really erratic. So it feels like we've been playing catch up for quite a while this year as to what kind of stock we're sitting on. And so right now it's basically just kind of brewing as frantically and as quickly as we can, turning our tanks over. Usually there'd be a couple of days leeway or not in between brews or whatever, but now it's just trying to pound as much beer as we can to get enough to get through December. So that's kind of right next. Right now it's just barely focusing on production and filling everything again and getting everything turned. But come the new year, I think it's gonna be really trying to grow into the new space in the front. When we've been on in the past, it's no real secret. I don't have a lot of love for the retail channels, particularly the LCBOs. It's a necessity. The Coles notes for anyone who's new is it's very much a necessity. We can't really cut it out completely, but I very much would like to try and move away from depending upon that channel for our success or failure as a business. So kind of growing into the new hospitality space up here, kind of redirecting as much of our production and as much as our volume as we can through the front of house here. Whether that's out the door to the bottle shop or in plants up here, folks on the beer hall side, or anyone who wants to rent or come down and have an event here in the space. In the wardroom there, so we can accommodate up to 50 people on that side. So basically, right, the way it's kind of set up right now is anyone who wants to come down and use the space, come down and use the space. Kind of community groups, birthday parties, all that kind of stuff. Space is there. Really, right now we're looking at like a basic room rental fee on like Friday and Saturday. Otherwise, just come in and use the space. So yeah, that's kind of what we're trying to do, and just kind of push out that awareness as much as possible. Well, one of the biggest questions that we got prior to the renovations was people was trying to like, hey, can we have our event here? And we had to say like, no, because we can't close the business for an event. So that's kind of one of the reasons why we wanted to put that space incorporated into the new layout, because we had that. We didn't say no anymore.
Well, community's always been important.
Yeah,
You guys at Royal City.
definitely. And being able to, especially this part of golf, we're pretty, I would say, pretty intrinsic in this area, in this neighborhood. We're a feature of this neighborhood. And we really like this neighborhood. I live in this neighborhood. Most of the guys that work here live very close by. So it's a case that we just want to be a space for folks from the neighborhood, from the area, to kind of come down and congregate and have a spot. There really isn't much to do on the east side of Guelph. So having something here now that we can accommodate a few more people is pretty exciting for us.
That's interesting. The east side of Hamilton, you could say the same thing. So what is it about the east side of something?
Clifford's down there now, so he's got something going down there pretty well. But
but up until then, there was
nothing there.
Nothing there. Yeah. What's been the most challenging thing, not from the brewery perspective, but through COVID, keeping the community engaged?
Yeah, it's that's a really good question. I think kind of one of the hardest pieces has been knowing like what to do and when to do and when not to do. If that makes sense. I think trying to balance the things that we're doing against the realities of people's lives and what our expectations are against the realities of people's lives. Yeah. Because it's been a very disruptive period, and we're kind of moving, knock on wood, moving through it now. Hopefully, anyway, we'll see how the December goes, I guess. But I think as a province and as a country, I think we're kind of through this last era, I guess now. But it was a really disruptive time in people's lives, and what people wanted to do, were willing to do, and kind of temper what we were trying to put out with respect to what people were looking for. I think was a very kind of like a balancing act, I would say. So that was a pretty challenge.
Having gone through this, the pandemic, the construction phase, has it changed how you guys reach out to your community through social media?
I think it's changed like the methodology. I think the message has stayed pretty consistent too. We always try to be fairly optimistic in the messaging and happy in the messaging that we do. I don't think that's changed too much at this point in time. We really like what we do for a living. It's like everything. There's good days and there's bad days. At the end of the day, you make beer. That's pretty awesome. So I think that trying to keep that tone up in that way is kind of always the way that we approach things. That being said, I think we are going to change we're working on changing kind of some of the way that we launch initiatives within the community. I think we talked about this last time back in August. We were on last. Just kind of changing our approach to be a little bit more quarterly, rather campaign-wise, rather than like individual event kind of thing. So we're going to try. And again, we got a little distracted from that this year, with all the construction and how long it wound up hopefully taking us. But I think that's kind of what we will go back to being one of the things for the companies is that idea of rather than trying to like do 12 community collabs a year that we do, we'll do like 4. Let's do a little bit more, go a little deeper with each of the groups that we're or each of the areas that we're collabing.
I'm going to take a break for the noise.
Yeah, that's all right.
Grab the next beer.
That compressor does come on.
No, that's okay. I was aware that was going to happen.
We'll be there for a second. All right. I think we'll do the Better Late Than Never next.
Okay.
Better Late Than Never is our 8th anniversary beer. late. Our anniversary is in June. But we did want to put one out this year. It was kind of important as to the brewery that we did put one out. Thank you. And we did kind of have a little fun poke a little fun at ourselves because it did take us a long time to get this all set up and ready. So we got a turtle in the can holding the checkered flag because we did cross the line eventually. But what we got here, so we make a beer called Longest Night every Christmas. Actually, they did Boise's Candy yesterday. As part of one of our Christmas lineup or holiday lineup. Longest Night is an historical style out of Norway, where Matt, our head brewer, has found this really cool thing. That we do. They used to do there is got distracted there. I lost my train of thought. This really cool thing they do there, where it's just a smash. They'll brew a single malt kind of Pilsner malt beer that they boil for 12 to 16 hours. They ferment it with kvike. It's got some juniper in it. They ferment it with kvike. There's a huge reduction in that boil, and that beer it winds up at like 10, 12%. And basically, the fermented kvike is done in 18 to 36 hours. The beer is ready. It's drank fresh, pretty much straight out of the fermenter. There's all that, when you see the smoke or the steam stop rising off the tank, everyone in the village comes by and starts drinking. So that beer is called Longest Night. That makes that as one of our seasonal beers for the holidays. But this is kind of a departure from that. This is I guess this would be Shortest Night. So basically, that our Longest Night winds up being about 8.5%. Now he doesn't boil it for quite 12 hours. We usually only boil about 8, but it's still a really long boil, and you get some really cool kind of caramelization out of that. That's some very interesting Maillard reactions in the kettle. It really turns the beer like it's a straight Pilsner malt beer, and it turns it like bright orange just from the long boil. It's a really cool beer. But this is kind of a junior version of it. So what Matt did with this one, he only boiled it for 4 hours, and it's got nowhere near the grain bill Longest Night does. So this one wound up at about 5%, but it's kind of take off of that. Again, kvike fermented, really short ferment, really hot ferment, and it's just done as a pale ale. A little bit different hopping in this one than would be a Longest Night. Longest Night's just nobles, but this is I guess would be Shortest Night, but better late than never. But yeah, you got a little bit of a longer boil in this one, so you do have a little bit of that kind of caramelization. But again, it's not, the body is a much lighter or more quaffable, I would say, than its counterpart is. But yeah, that was the idea behind this one. So we went basically, our kettle full here is about 12 hex. We reduced this one down to about 7, maybe 7.5 before we ran it off. Longest Night usually goes from about 12 hex down to about 6, 5.5. So it's a huge reduction in that beer. So we stopped about halfway, and you wound up with kind of an average night, I suppose.
I'm gonna say, wasn't quite prepared to do the 12 hour.
That's a really interesting beer. If you're coming out this way or online through, I think we're going to release it. I guess it's December, like tomorrow, isn't it?
Yeah.
Probably on the weekend, I guess, we're going to release that here. So maybe, yeah, if you're interested in trying it, put this up online. We'll ship it out your way. Yeah. Anyway, this one's a little bit lighter, body, a little thinner, much more quaffable, but you do get that kind of really interesting fruity character you get from a hot kvike ferment in here as well.
Yeah, trying to place the back end taste. You said juniper, and that's what comes to mind, but that's not what it is.
No, there's no juniper in this one.
No.
There is in the other one. But yeah, you generally wind up with a fair bit of tropical ester out of this strain of Voss kvike that we're fermenting with. Get a fair bit of tropical kind of esters out of that ferment.
The back to the mango. That's what it is.
But yeah, we ferment this really hot. I think it's pitched about 38, and it goes like a rocket. It's done in generally under 2 days.
Wow.
So it's makes really cool stuff. When you're using it for kind of as it's intended, it's just as a wild ferment.
Yeah.
It's pretty cool, but it doesn't have the other somewhat undesirable, necessarily always desirable characteristics of a wild yeast. It is akin enough to regular brewer's yeast that it's so yeah, it's very cool. Very cool stuff.
Do you use many different versions of Quebec, or is it just?
We've used probably 4 off the top of my head to date. We started out using blank here. Not Voss, the other main one.
Yeah.
I can't think of the name right now. The first one we were playing around with. Maddie moved primarily to Voss about a year and a half ago. We have used a couple other ones, experimental kind of stuff we've been brewing. We used the crispy pike, the lager adjacent pike.
Yeah.
A few times as well. We did a beer called Switchyard a couple of years ago that had.
You're getting these all from Escarpment?
Yeah.
Does Matt push the envelope and like see how high he can actually do it at?
No, I haven't asked him that. I know we do pitch this about 38 in my kind of old school mentality that's way past the envelope, so no need to push it anymore. But it does like the heat, which that is weird to me anyway. But I like what it does, and I like the characteristics. I like that you can ferment a relatively clean lager, I'll call it lager, quote unquote, at 20 degrees.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah.
And you wind up with a beer that is recognizable as a lager at a 20-degree ferment, which is
For a lager, that's
hot. Yeah, it's very hot. So that part's kind of cool for me. Yeah, it's definitely neat stuff. And the EC boys, I call them over here, have been pretty instrumental in the global commercialization and development of bike.
They're doing such a phenomenal job.
Yeah, they really are.
What's been the most surprising thing for you in the last year?
Surprising. How long construction materials take to acquire? Yeah, cost of a LVL. Cost of an LVL. No. Surprising.
I take it there's been so many of them that you're just.
Yeah, it's. I have to come back to that one. There's been a year of surprises, I would say. The most surprising thing is that the floor that we're standing on right now is all brand new, because the old floor that was under here was a bridge, not a floor. That was a big surprise. When we were renovating the place here, I'm not sure you meant within this space or in the industry at large, but I'm going to go with this space in the question.
That's fine.
The boys are cutting the hole for the drain that wound up going right there. They got to about 6 inches off the end of the last cut, the square they were cutting out, and the concrete collapsed 6 inches because the 80 or so year old concrete is about 110-year-old building we're in right now, which is always full of surprises.
Yeah.
But the last cut, the 80-year-old concrete, it was actually about 4 inches thick. It was a bridge. It was all the substrate, which was under it, was pretty much just ash from back when this was an oven factory, and it had all eroded. And so we had a pretty good 6-inch gap underneath the floor in here. So that was a pretty big surprise.
Which meant you had to put a hole in the floor in.
Yep, that was. We were planning on pouring probably about 400 or 500 square feet of concrete in the back here in new places.
Yeah.
We were going to reinforce some spots with some new tanks.
Yeah.
But we got up to pour in just shy of 4,000 square feet of concrete.
Which is a lot of concrete.
That's a lot of concrete.
And there's a lot of backfill too.
Yes, it is. We had to dig that stuff down a couple of feet and then backfill on top of it. So yeah, it was that was a big surprise. The potty mouth was out that day for sure. So that was
Just took my next question.
that was a pretty tough one, or surprising one anyway. That a little expensive.
I can well imagine, because backfill of 4,000 square feet of concrete is not cheap.
No, it's not. But you know, at the end of the day, it's good that we found that out before we put a new 40-barrel tank in. We're talking about 60s at the time.
Yeah.
Putting a 60-barrel tank in here, it's going to weigh 12,000 kilos when it's full, or not quite. Exaggerate. It's going to weigh 8,000 kilos when it's full.
Yeah, it's got a heavy footprint.
Yeah. So it's that was glad we found that out there before, like, rather than when it was on its side after it went through the floor. Yeah. Yeah.
Could ask you what you would do differently now that you've got hindsight.
What would we do differently? That's a good one. I would have certainly bought construction materials a year earlier and found somewhere to store them. I would have bought every stud, every sheet of drywall we could have in the summer of 2021. That would have been a much better time to have acquired all of those things. That would have been that would have saved a lot of money. What else would we have done different? I think we would have. I would have adjusted my expectations of how long this project was going to take. That is definitely something else I would have done a little differently. We had it. I kind of had in my head we were going to be all done and through this in 5 months, and it was 10. So that's still actually not that bad, all things considered. But in my head, I think I would have told myself just temper that a little bit. That's a little optimistic.
Probably if everything had worked perfectly.
If
It was
everything,
not unrealistic.
yeah, everything worked perfectly, but
That's what happens.
yep. But alas, alack, that was not what we wanted to. But that's okay. We're here now, and we're just trying to make the best of what we
You're here now. You never have to move that packaging line. Well, I shouldn't say never. Touch wood. You don't have to move that packaging line every time you use it, which is a big bonus.
That is huge. Yeah, absolutely. It's saw the boys in the back smiling after a canning run the other day. That never usually used to happen. So that's good. Coming in here, it's 11 and it's noon and they're done canning already. Like, oh, hey, that's fantastic. That usually be like 3. So yeah.
What do you think is the most challenging thing the industry is going to?
Access to market. I think that is the big thing. As I'm harping on, I like to harp on retail quite a bit as a difficult channel due to the nature of the way it's set up in the province. But there are a lot of breweries in this province right now that are all trying to force their production through the same finite amount of shelf space that's available to us.
Yep. And that is an issue, a finite amount of shelf space. And you don't have the pockets that the big guys have.
That's absolutely it, right? We don't have the money to spend on marketing. We don't have the money to spend on advertising or merchandising or all the things that the big breweries do and even bigger craft breweries can do. I believe that is one of the bigger challenges the industry here faces right now. And when that gets sorted out, or how that gets sorted out, is going to play a pretty big role in how this industry looks in the next 5 years. So that's kind of what I
Any guesses on how that's going to sort itself out?
Not optimistic ones, I would say. I think that ending the master framework agreement is going to be a very nuanced. So a master framework agreement is the agreement between the provincial government and the BAT and Molson essentially on how the beer stores monopoly was going to end. That agreement expires January 1st, 2025, if I'm not mistaken. But 2025, I think, is when it will actually be gone. But they're negotiating how it's going to be gone right now. And how that landscape comes down is going to dictate what the landscape looks like in Ontario post the MFA. So I'm curious, very concerned, but curious to see how it actually shakes out when it shakes out. And you know, as I say, and winding that up and opening up liquor or beer sales in the province is a fairly nuanced and delicate thing, I believe. And I don't believe that, or I'm concerned rather that folks in charge of doing that right now are not terribly nuanced in their approach.
No, you're right. That's not, that's not something that they're versed in.
No. So cautiously optimistic, but fatalistically optimistic. Is that a thing? I don't know.
I think that's
We'll make it a thing. We'll make it a thing.
I think that's a thing.
So, you know, my kind of way I'd like to approach that, where, you know, kind of where Royal City is right now, is we just kind of try to take ourselves out of having to play that game, right? Of having to deal with the uncertainty of what's going to happen. You know, we're going to wind up, I think, seeing a lot more beer in a lot more places, which on the surface is great. A lot more access to customers and beer drinkers, with convenience stores being one, more grocery exposure, other places where beer hasn't traditionally been sold or been able to be sold before, which I think is great. But that's not going to come without some, it's not going to present or happen without some problems coming along with it. And how kind of the industry anticipates those would be, is what I'm curious to see how it shakes out. You know, on a product basis, that can be like just the freshness of the product. You know, are you going to get fridge space at every 7-Eleven in Ontario? Probably, maybe not. Are big brewers going to be allowed to buy shelf space? Not right now. We're not a big brewer, but big brewers are not allowed to purchase shelf space in grocery stores. But every other product that's sold in the grocery store purchases shelf space. So how is that going to shake down as well? How, you know, what are the ways that some of these things are going to wind up coming down the pipe? Those are some of the bigger questions. Does parity pricing die?
Yeah.
I don't know, right? On one hand, yeah, parity pricing should die. On the other hand, you know, if you could buy beer for, I'm worried about becoming a race to the bottom by the big guys, basically being able to say, hey, well, now we're allowed to price these guys out of the market. We can do that. So I mean,
Yeah, they can.
It's kind of hard to say no to like effectively free beer, no matter who's making it, right? Especially when you look at, you know, across our sector right now on the craft side, we've got increasing material costs. The cost of our inputs have gone up insane the last year. It's just crazy amounts. You know, you're used to seeing like, you know, a 5 to 10% year-over-year increase. We're 50, we're at 80% in some of our inputs this year. Price of cardboard for corrugated, for example, it's off the charts right now. Labor costs are going up constantly as well. We need to pay more to keep entertained people. It's much easier for companies that make more beer to swallow those costs and dissolve them into their capacity. So I'm worried there's gonna be like kind of a 1-2 punch in terms of, you've got no more basement on pricing gains.
Yeah.
And at the same time, we have dramatically increasing costs of inputs and operating costs.
Yeah. And yours are going to be more magnified than the big guys.
Absolutely. And you know,
you can't book out 2 years.
This is it. We can't lock down that range. I can't take that risk to contract us up that far out. And you know, the biggest cost for a lot of the big guys is it's not inputs, it's not labor, it's energy and taxes. For us, it's labor. Like that's hands down the biggest expense we have. Is labor. Number 2 is taxes. Number 3 is inputs. Although number 3 is encroaching on inputs now. So it's, yeah, it'll be an interesting couple of years to see how it all shakes out. Sorry, that was a much more long-winded answer than I thought you were looking
exactly
for.
What I was looking for.
But it's not all doom and gloom by any means. But
you answered my question. That's how are you preparing for it? You can talk about that. What you're doing.
all right, there you go. There we
I'm
are.
going to go grab a couple glasses.
Yeah, absolutely.
Go to the next beer.
Sounds good. Let's do Riverside.
Okay.
So Riverside is our full fat IPA, 7 and a bit percent or 7%. I think actually it used to be 7.5. I think we've only down to 7. Yeah, kind of new school, New England inspired hazy IPA. It does what it says on the can, I think. But you're gonna get a fair bit of tropical on there. No, we leave it a little bit more bitter than a true like New England IPA would be. That one actually tastes a little oxidized. So that's new. All right. Sorry, I'm a little critical. I apologize.
You are entitled to be critical of your own production.
But yep. Thank you. I don't mean to turn anyone off. That one does taste a little oxidized though. But yes, it's our hazy IPA. It's got Big Secret, Mosaic, and I think Matt's sticking some Galaxy in there now as well. And those are the big dry hops. Amarillo and Citra, I believe, are the kettle hops. But yeah, it's fairly. One of the things that we've been trying to work towards the last little while is rather than brewing to varietal, it's brewing to flavor. So basically looking at what we have in terms of hops and how we can use not necessarily the varieties that we have here, but what we're getting out of each type of the characteristic that's coming from each lot of hops that we have, and how we can adjust some of the brewing batch in, batch out to reflect what we've got. Sorry, maybe not batch in, batch out, but year in, year out.
Yeah.
So the hops do change in this beer quite a bit year over year, just basically depending on the characteristic of that year's Galaxy or that year's Mosaic or whatever it is, or the lot of that year's Mosaic that we have.
Yeah. Well, yeah, because you're never going to get the same every year.
Yeah, exactly. They're all terroir and rain in March.
So how do you make that decision? Do you do a tiny test batch, or do you make it on the fly?
Yeah, I mean, generally what we'll look at is we'll the first time we'll brew it, it'll be the same time, it'll be the same as it was last year. And then it'll be a sensory issue. Okay, all right, what are we doing? How does this compare to the ideal of what Riverside tastes like versus what we have here? How much that's up to the hops. So where it scores within the various flavor components, when Dan and Matt do mostly all the QC here now anymore, I used to do some of it, but not anymore. All those beers are assessed based on the flavor profile that they have. So we do a fair bit of QC tasting here. We pull every batch we can. Six QC cans go away. We drink one at 1 month, sorry, one at 1 week, one at 1 month, one at 2 months, one at 3 months, one at 3 months warm, one at 6 months cold. Just so that we can see how that beer ages over time. But anyway, so when getting back around to your question, so a lot of that tasting, a lot of that scoring of the way that beers present determines how we act beyond that. So when we know we have 2023 or 2022 hops in, CY 2022 hops in, which we'll probably get in maybe the next couple of weeks, maybe early January, those will start to get less. Well, the first batch of the year we brew with those hops, it'll get pretty rigorously assessed where these things are. And then we look at the hops and say, all right, well, we'll do a rub or we'll do a tea and see, well, okay, what are we getting out of this? What needs to be tweaked? Where are we short? What has that? That's generally how it's not a terribly scientific process. It's really much more qualitative in terms of just assessment and sense.
One of my favorites wine shows, because I'm more first on wine here. The guy talks about the whole science of wine, and then when he's doing the fermentation, he puts on hip waders and climbs into the fermentation tank and punches the wine down, like the grapes down. And I'm just like, so what happened to all the scientific stuff? Because he's talking about how it feels when you're stepping through it.
Yeah.
It tells you so much about it. And I'm just like, so much for science. It's all sensory now.
Yeah.
But that with hops, it's you can have all the science, but the bottom line is it is sensory.
Yeah. How does this beer taste?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now I've lost my train of thought. You discussed with me, probably the first time you were on my show, how there's like zero sweet spot between a small craft brewer until you get right up to being the size of a bat before you actually get cost synergies.
Well, I mean, Moosehead makes it happen. They're quite a bit smaller than that. But yes, there is definitely a gulf between mid-sized brewers and large brewers in Canada. There are very few mid-sized brewers in the country. Just thinking a couple off the top of my head would be good, like Brick would be one, and Moosehead would be one. The breweries that
They've been around for a long time.
they have been, absolutely. These are breweries that kind of produce between about, north of 100,000 hex, but under like 600,000, 700 hex a year. You look down the States and the whole place is rife with those. There's tiny brewers, there's brew pubs, there's mid-sized brewers, there's large brewers. And we don't have that same piece in Canada. We have small brewers and we have huge brewers. We don't really have much in the middle. And there are definitely bigger small brewers, but I mean, I'm still, they're not a small brewer relative to us, but they're still a small brewer relative to Molson or even Slimming. But we are very short of that piece. And there are several reasons I like for that. First and foremost is taxation. Just the way that in Ontario in particular, that tax structure is set up just makes it almost impossible to be that you have to go from, you can't grow organically, you've got to grow exponentially. Or you can go from about 100,000, you got to go to about 250, 300,000 a year and become viable again, basically the tax structure is.
It's a huge jump.
It is, absolutely. It doesn't, most guys don't grow that big, and it's for that reason. But when they start getting bigger and bigger and bigger, they start making less and less money. And the big guy shows up and says, hey, we both got a problem. You're not profitable. You have 1 point whatever % of our market share. We want it back and you want to make money. So there it is. There's a dump truck.
How much is it going to take?
Dump truck involved, and the keys change hands. So it's very difficult to move beyond that or to grow in that way in the country. And also the other thing to keep in mind is in Canada, beer consumption has been relatively flat. It's not a growing industry. Despite the population almost doubling since the last time beer consumption was growing. It's fewer people drinking the same amount of beer as before. So those two kind of factors. The demographic one is that hey, there's less beer being consumed by fewer people, and the way some of that economies of scale and that tax system is set up kind of disincentivizes people to grow past a certain point, which
So we're never going to get a Southern Tier.
unlikely. I don't think. Relative to where Southern Tier fits into that industry, into New York or even in the States at large, I don't think you'll get one that represents roughly that same size, or like a New Glarus, for example, something like that. That's in that mid-sized brewer category. No, not one that will stay or be viable very long.
No, because at the cost to get to a point where you're paying for the big guys is not cheap.
No, exactly.
And there's no money in it. As you said, your profitability keeps going down.
Until you get to that point where you do get all these benefits of economies of scale. I know that I was talking earlier about our labor thing, right? Our labor being our biggest expense relative to of our expenses. And we have a 10-barrel brew house, just look over right there. And there's 4 guys that work in production here. And there's 4 guys that we're going to ship to Sleeman too. And they're making.
They produce a lot more.
They're I can do the math real quick here, but 10:30 January 2nd, they've made our annual production, and it's 4 guys doing it, right? 4 guys or girls doing it. So it's that adds up quick. That factor, and again, those folks make more than the guys do here, but not relative to the production they're putting, the volume they're putting.
Yeah, well, they could put 8 guys in sleepers.
And it's still, we still be all right. Yeah.
It wouldn't have an impact on their bottom line.
Yep. And that's it. So yeah, I mean, those are definitely some of the challenges that we, as a small brewery, face in the country or in the province and the landscape here.
What's been the most interesting change in the industry in the last year, for the last 2 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was the stampede towards e-commerce, and then the slow ebb of the wave back away from it. Kind of seeing how that went and is going. It still goes, but how just all in we went to e-commerce right away. And that was really it. That was all we had. And then how slowly but surely, ever since about July 2020, that's been just consistently a little bit less every month, and then the in-person is kind of a little bit more every month. We definitely sell less beer now than we did pre-COVID, but that is mainly because we pulled out of a bunch of LCBOs across. We've shortened our LCBO distribution, but for a while during COVID, we were selling more beer than we ever had, just through the online channels. That was kind of interesting to see how that developed so quickly and then proceeded also relatively steadily. I wouldn't say it was a quickly receded, but it's been a steady now that proceeds. Reservation. It's a fairly steady decline. Yeah. I also kind of think that interesting. There's two kind of things I thought interesting is that pre-COVID the pace of like new brewery openings in the province was really high.
Yep.
And that definitely slowed down. But the surprise to me is that it didn't stop.
No, it didn't.
There are definitely folks still opening the doors during COVID and post-COVID world, which is like that's cool. And it's good to see that the industry hasn't like just stalled. That makes sense.
Yeah.
I think seeing that continue to grow and to continue to folks still be interested in brewing and craft brewing and running a brewery didn't go away. So there was a lot of reasons to think twice in the landscape post 2020.
Yeah,
even pre 2020. I'm glad to see that it didn't.
There are still a few untapped markets in this province. Not many, but there are still a few.
The craft beers, craft beer in every duty-free shop in the province. There's one. Every time I cross the border, it's just isn't that much. You don't see it. It's just the big guys in the beer in the duty-free.
No one's going to afford to be there.
Yeah,
which is an unfortunate setup.
Crack the last beer open.
We'll crack the last beer open.
Sounds good. Very good. All right, last one is one of my favorites we do too. It's the Berserker. Cheers. Won't keep you from drinking while I yap about it this time. I apologize for that last time.
No, that's okay.
So this one's Berserker. Berserker is our kettle sour. We've been making for quite a while now. At this point, again, it's kettle sour. So we do lacto in the kettle, let it sit for generally about 24 hours. Its pH is dropped where we want it. We don't want this to be a mind-puckeringly sour beer. So we stopped. This one doesn't get below about 3.2, 3.4 pH. Some of them go substantially lower than that, but again, we're not trying to strip the skin off the inside of people's mouths. The kettle sour, as soon as the kettle hits pH, we just turn the kettle on, kill all the lacto in there, and then treat it like a normal beer. This one is fermented with pike as well. And again, mainly the reason for that is We want a fairly quick ferment on it. And Kvike doesn't seem to mind the pH that the beer is at. Generally, fermenting at a low pH environment is really going to stress most yeast strains or most kind of pale ale strains. And the ferment you're going to get out of it is not always the most predictable or consistent, I would say. It also makes repitching not a thing. You're not if you get a good ferment out of a standard yeast or standard brewer's yeast in a sour, generally it's one and done. You get new yeast for the next batch. But Kvike is pretty much bomb proof. It goes into that tank. We harvest it. We pitch it the next batch, and away it goes. It doesn't seem to mind the low pH. So it's a little benefit. We get two things out of it. We get both a quick ferment and we get repitchability. So that's one of the main reasons we use the Kvike. It's not so much for the flavor profile on these ones, but it's just more of a process piece, I would say. We do kind of with the marketing on it lean into the Norwegian heritage a little bit on the label. Also a little of the tongue in cheek, the Berserker. It's we used to make it a 4.2, but it's up to 4.7 now. Again, that's just kind of get a little bit more balance in the product. But still, it's not exactly a beer you consider being a Berserker at 4.7. We generally do a different fruit puree infusion in kind of different batches over the course of the year. This is the raspberry lemon. It's probably one of my favorite ones that we did. I think it turns out really well with the raspberry lemon. But Matt does mango, pineapple, and lychee and cherry, black cherry and lychee. I think was one of the ones we did last year. Blood orange and tangerine, which is kind of like the same thing, but or it does a similar thing in the beer. But yeah, we use all real fruit puree that goes into it. Again, just trying to do our best to make the product as good as we possibly can. Flavoring or chemical that aren't derived directly from the process of brewing. So I suppose arguably lactic acid is chemical, but it's produced naturally from the bacteria in the beer, or the kettle anyway. Bacteria don't make it to the beer. But yeah, that's the Berserker. So we strive to always have this guy available in one of its different fermented durations.
Two things come to mind. First one, because you're dealing with such a low pH level, is it hard to get the balance?
It can be, yeah. I think you really, I think the best beers, the beers that I like to drink the most, are the ones that are best balanced. They're not going to be the ones that people are hanging their hats on stats on. You know, talking Southern Tier, I used to like drinking Unearthly, but that was like 150 IBU or something like that in that beer. Yeah, that's ridiculous. Who needs 150 IBU in a beer? The stats are less important to me than the drinkability of the beer we're talking about. And it was a cool thing to drink Unearthly. Don't get on that. Don't mean to like pick on them in particular. But drinking that beer was a challenge because it was big and it wasn't terribly well balanced. So for me, I know Matt feels the same way here. When we brew, we try to make something that goes in the glass that's going to be something that does what it's supposed to do. We're not making a sour at 2.4 pH here because we can. We want to make something that is going to be in that range, but ultimately work with what's there and be something that is not out of balance. So that's a long-winded way of saying, yeah, we do tinker around with it, but ultimately the goal is how does it present the can, and how does it help us? And you say it could be a little more sour. You know, if we did drop it a little bit in this one, I think it would be all right. But at the end of the day, I think what we've got turned out
The balance of this. Get the raspberry lemons absolutely both there.
Yeah.
And neither one is overpowering the other. Yeah. You hit the two flavors I love the most.
Awesome. Well, cheers. Glad for that. Yep. I quite like the beer as well.
What trends do you see in beer right now?
I think the lager thing is going places. I think we're going to start seeing more small brewers investing a lot more time in lager. That's kind of what might be next for us. I don't want to talk too much about it because we're not there yet.
Yep.
But we have all this extra space here now. Looks pretty full. I'm back here again already, but there is going to be some more tank space in our future, so that we can properly make a couple of different beers year round.
Well, I'm going to say, lager's a huge investment in tank space.
Tank is in time. Yep. It's and you know,
Because you're tying up a tank for a lot longer than you normally would.
yeah, and you can't rush it if you want to do it properly. I don't. I can't. Yeah, it's there's you don't want to. I wouldn't want to cheat. That's the thing. I think that if you're going to do it well, if something's worth doing, from my old granddad always used to say to me, if something's worth doing, it's worth doing right. So you decide if it's worth doing, but if you decide it's worth doing, do it right.
Yeah.
But so for me, it's like, yeah, I want to do this. I want to make more lager, and I think that's where things are going. I think a lot of guys are going to start doing that, because ultimately, I think that's what people want to drink. I mean, people like IPA, people like all that. That's not going anywhere by any means, but you know, how many barley wines do you have at a sitting? How many like triple IPAs do you have at a sitting? How many cans of lager do you have back in a sitting? Be too many. And I think it's at the end of the day, it's just what people want to. It's beer people consume.
Yeah,
that's it. Right? I'll get one of these, but I'll get 3 of these. Right. So I think the proof's in the pudding there. But, and I think as craft matures as a practice and as an ideology, it's got to kind of come around back to that. Craft is always kind of the upstart. We're kind of getting away from the lager. We don't want to drink lager anymore. We want to drink IPAs. We want to drink these ales. But I think slowly but surely we're kind of back home now. And this, all truth be told, it's much harder to make very good lager than it is to make very good version of other beers or other beers. To make that crisp and clean and straightforward, one-dimensional is not one-dimensional in a bad way, or as an exclusive descriptor, but generally lager is much more straightforward than ales are. To do that,
you can't hide a mistake in a lager.
That's it. That's exactly it. And we can hide mistake in stout all the time.
Yeah.
Not that we do, but you can do it.
I did the Anheuser-Busch tour in St. Louis.
Mhm.
The first thing the guy said is, "See all those guys up there? They're chemical engineers. And the reason they're chemical engineers, you can't hide a mistake in a batch of Budweiser."
Yeah, you can. No, you can hide it in 10 batches of Budweiser.
Yeah, you can hide it in 10 batches, but like you have to make them the same every time,
Yeah.
and you can't hide a mistake because you can't hide it.
Yeah, no, it doesn't work. But you can blend it. That's
I'm sure that they've done that.
but
Yes.
yeah, no,
But that's the idea. It's like lagers have to be done right.
There's. But I would say that's kind of where I think things might be headed. Or I think I think they're already there. I think you're going to see more of it.
Yeah.
Around.
Yeah. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, happy to.
We appreciate the gift of your time and the story of Royal City Brewing.
Well, thanks for coming down. Thanks for coming down to the spot. Thanks for having me on again. Give a little tour around earlier, but it's actually pretty cool. I'm really happy that we got to this spot. We've been trying to make this idea here happen for about 7 years, and we just kind of constantly ran up against our neighbor who wasn't ready to leave yet. And if there's ever a small day, small silver linings in horrible events. The reality of the COVID world kind of made him go, yeah, I've had enough. And so we were able to negotiate his release out of the space and be able to take it over. So seeing that kind of 7 years of, boy, we really need to do this.
Yeah.
Finally in front of us, it's pretty cool. And it feels really good. I know the guys back here are already much happier working in the environment here than it is than before. I know. We're
Cam showed me where the canning line used to be and how they had to set it up. I am so glad I never canned beer here.
We, you know, we haven't turned over a lot of staff in the back of this place in the, I guess, almost 9 years we've been operating here now. But we have turned over a lot of canning guys, and that's no aspersions on them. It was a shitty role here based on the way it was set up. And you know, I spent enough time of my time doing it as well. I know it was crap.
Yeah.
And there's no way to excuse it. It's just the reality.
Yeah.
It was the reality. Now it's not the reality anymore. That's pretty awesome. Pretty happy with that.
Siraj, I've been neglectful and I didn't tell you, but the Christmas party's on the 9th of December at Reverend's Barrel Works, 7 o'clock. It's a Friday night. If you can make it down from Toronto. Sean Dinley is joining us next week. He's a brewer at Bench, but he's also an alumnus from Kickoff. He used to come in. He played music there. He played my birthday party a couple times and the Christmas party a couple times.
Very cool.
Thanks for joining in, everybody. I'm gonna
Get my nose hairs in this now so I can shut this off.